In his 30 years on the High Court, Justice Scalia was known for his towering intellect, his quick wit, and his kindness to his colleagues on the bench. And while he spoke often about the Catholic faith, he spoke little about his personal faith. Those around him, though, saw evidence of his faith in his everyday life. Justice Clarence Thomas writes, Scalia's faith was robust, deeply personal, and central to his life. A new book, Antonin Scalia on Faith, Lessons from an American Believer, is a compilation of remembrances from family, friends, and former colleagues that paints a picture of not only Scalia's great legal mind, but also of his deeply held Christian beliefs.
Well, Justice Scalia had 9 children. 2 of them join us now to talk about their father's faith and their views on the court. Chris and Heather Paul Scalia, welcome to the 700 Club. Gentlemen, we're glad to have you with us. Listen, your father, you sat around the dinner table. Did he talk about weighty matters of the law, about philosophy? Was he just a good dad?
Yes. The dinner table was for all of those things. It was philosophy, theology, and legal lessons all wrapped up into one.
But it wasn't only that. We had, kind of goofy conversations about, television and joke telling, things like that. But one of the fun things about our family, I think, was that the conversation was so varied, and Dad was often, but not always, at the center of things. Well,
let me ask you, what was his view of the Constitution? There have been many disputes right now about what the Constitution stands for. What was he known for in his judicial philosophy?
Well, you mentioned earlier that he was an originalist, and what that meant was that he argued the Constitution should be interpreted according to its original public meaning, as opposed to applying the morals of the times to it. Basically, he thought if the Constitution is to be changed, it shouldn't be judges who do that changing. It should be through the will of the people. And one of his most important points about the Constitution and its original public meaning that comes through very clearly in a lot of the speeches in this new collection is that the founders made sure there was a wide space for religion in American public life. The Establishment Clause basically said that there could be no official state religion, but the state could encourage religion as long as it was not forcing one or the other. And my father argued and was very concerned that that vision of the Constitution and its original meaning was being lost.
The chapter, the one particular speech that stuck out to me in this book, and he had many speeches that he made that are so profound, but the one when he really dug into the case law of the Supreme Court and the rather radical view that the current court holds of the role of religion in public life. Could you share that with us, please?
Well, as Chris said, he interpreted the Constitution to provide a wide space for religion in public life, and that is contrary to what a number of his colleagues believed. They saw a more restricted view of things and interpreted the Constitution that way, sort of bending towards the times, which in general have seen a restriction of religion in public life. But our father really looked back at the original, the meaning and of the words of the Constitution and how it was first lived in our nation, and saw the vibrant religious life that accompanied the drafting and the first living out of the Constitution.
The question, here in Virginia, we had an established the Church of England was an established religion. And the Constitution says Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion. What they were talking about was a state-sponsored religion that taxed the people to pay for it. Now, your father said, okay, that's what the law, the Constitution says, but the current court, according to what he wrote and you've got in this book, said basically that any move toward faith was a violation of the First Amendment, that was an establishment of religion just to acknowledge faith. And then he pointed to cases like Zorach versus Clausen which, William O. Douglas had written and said, we're a religious people whose institution presupposed the existence of a supreme being. But he went into a whole litany of those cases that was so profound. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think you have it exactly right. He was really worried about that trend, and he quoted Douglas and always pointed out that Douglas was no far right-wing justice at all. He was a fairly liberal justice. So my father pointed out that it used to be that it was understood the government had to be neutral between religions, between sects and denominations. But starting really in the 1960s, the Supreme Court changed that approach and said the state had to be neutral between religion and irreligion or non-religion. And my father said that, that's definitely not what the founders wanted. The founders made a wide space for religion in public life because they understood that religion was an important source of virtue for most people, not all people, but most people. And in order for a democracy to work, in order for representative government to thrive, you needed a virtuous people. So that's why the founders wanted that space kept open for religion in the public square.
Your father, you've got in this book, again, a quote, your father mentioned George Washington's second inaugural address where he said, reason and experience forbid us to expect public morality in the absence of religious principle. And he was so strong in what he believed. Do you see any other members of the court that can share your father's faith?
Well, Clarence Thomas is. I run into Clarence Thomas on occasion when I offer Mass on Sundays. He's a very devout man and shared our father's faith, and that was one of the things that united those two men whose backgrounds were otherwise so completely different, but their shared Catholic faith really knit them together and brought them, I think, very close.
We had the joy of having your father as the guest for a couple of times at Regent University, and I had the pleasure of sitting next to him during dinner, and he told me a couple of jokes. He was interested in some of the movies. He wanted to know if I'd watched one that by my friend, whatever his name was, I forget. But he was such a wonderful human being, and I know you found the same thing. He wasn't just some. He never felt because he was a Supreme Court judge that he was somehow removed from the people, did he?
Not at all. In fact, he preferred to be, I think, with just, get out of the Beltway and just be with ordinary people. That's really sort of his background growing up in Queens, and that's what he enjoyed. And as Chris said, yeah, at the dinner table we did sometimes talk about theology or philosophy or law, but then there was just ordinary joking around. And ever since he was on the court, people would come up to us and say, "Wow, it must be amazing that he's on the court." But for us, he was very just normal and regular, and just sort of much like any other dad.
Well, he was a tremendous man, and I know you missed him. Did you have any inkling that he had some kind of a heart condition that would kill him the way it did?
Well, I mean, we knew that he wasn't in the peak of health, but I mean, I think we were as surprised as anybody that he passed away so suddenly. And that's obviously a very, very difficult way for our father to have died. And I think Paul and I both, everybody who knew him, wish they had a chance to say goodbye and thank you. But we're confident that I don't know that. We're glad he lived such a faithful life, and that he worked so hard to be close to his God over the course of his life and pass that religious belief along to us.
I'm so glad he did. Well, thank you for this book. Ladies and gentlemen, it's called Antonin Scalia on Faith, and a series of speeches that this great jurist wrote about his Catholic faith and his belief in God. But the one that stood out to me is where he went exactly against the current trend of the Supreme Court that says that the establishment means having anything to do with God, that was a violation of the First Amendment. And this is a shocking holding, but it's being held by the majority of the Supreme Court, and we wish that Antonin Scalia was still with us, but we appreciate his sons. And their book, it's called On Faith. It's available wherever books are sold. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being with us.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.